going to go through creating in-place family components, which is 3D modelling that happens within the program or in the project. Now today we're going to create the kitchen bench. We've got a vanity unit in the laundry, one in the base in the bathroom and one in the ensuite. So I'm going to start with the kitchen and talk through one of the ways that we might produce this. You can see that it's a very simplistic view of a kitchen, and for those of us who have looked in any detail at the kitchen, you would know that it's got a bench top and then cupboards or drawers underneath, and then it has a skirting or a kickboard that sits underneath, somewhere between 100mm and 150mm high. Now what we've done here, just to keep things simple, is that we're going to just block this in from 0, which is our floor level, up to 900 high, the standard height for a bench. And the reason being is we're just at the design stage. We want to make sure that the client's happy with the overall design before we go into any great detail of creating the kitchen. However, this is a really clever way of very quickly getting the mass and the proportions of the kitchen up and running so the client can see it in 3D without having to put in too much extra detail. So in REVIT, I'm going to start my ground floor plan. The reason I need to start the ground floor plan is because every time we do some modelling, we need to tell REVIT where it is that our work plane is. If we're on a ground floor, we automatically presume, or REVIT automatically presumes, that our work plane is that ground floor. So I'll talk a little bit more about the work plane later on, but for the moment that's all we need to worry about. I'm coming to my architecture tab. I'm going to component and I'm going to model in place. I'm choosing casework, which is joinery. I'm calling it kitchen bench tops, not so important for this one. Now most times, I'd say 98 times out of 100, the only extrusion that we need is this one here, extrusion. Now, simple extrusion is made up of a 2D profile, which we're about to draw, and then it's given a depth. So you can see here we've got the extrusion start and the extrusion end. We're going to plug those in a minute. I'm going to draw the perimeter of the kitchen. I can use pick lines. And notice I can also lock those in. I'm going to have to come back and trim them out though. And also notice that I'm drawing fairly quickly and easily and not paying a whole lot of attention to the dimensions. And now I'm going to work back from here. It needs to be a closed loop, no lines over lines, so I'm going to use my trim command, TR, clicking on the lines I want to keep to tidy that up. I'll hit escape a couple of times to get out of that command, and I'll use my temporary dimensions to make sure that the width of my bench is 600 all the way around. That's the standard width for a kitchen bench. Up here, I've allowed some room for a fridge. I'm just clicking on this dotted line, so this blue line. Dragging and dropping, so I'm clicking on that blue line. I held down my left key on the mouse and dragging it to the face. And I'm going to nominate about 800. However, this is something I would check with my client because fridges vary very much. This little tool in here is called a fillet arc. It's in the draw tool, not the modifier. You've got to hover over it to find it. And when I click it on, I can check radius. And I'm going to tell that radius to be 200. I'm going to create the curves on the edge of my bench. Very 1980s. Clicking again on the two sides that I want to retain. So I'll just do that again. As I zoom in this time, I'm coming up, I'm still in the extrusion, I'm still drawing my 2D profile, fillet arc, I click radius, I nominate 200, and I'm clicking on the lines that I want to keep. Notice I can adjust that if I want to. I can click on that. And the lines around it will automatically update as well. Over here in the properties of our extrusion, I've got an extrusion start and an extrusion end. And can you see that the work plane that I referred to before is greyed out, which means we can't adjust it. but its default is ground floor because we were in the ground floor plan when we created that. So our extrusion start in this situation is going to be 0. We do want this to extrude all the way from the ground floor, and the height of the kitchen bench, as I mentioned before, is 900, standard height for a kitchen bench. At this point I could give it a material. I'm not going to bother for the sake of this tutorial, but I would ordinarily. I'm going green tick to finish my extrusion. Remember, a number of extrusions can live in the one family, so I could go on and create another extrusion if I wanted. However, I don't. I've finished the extrusion, and now I'm going to finish the model. Now, to see how that looks, if I go to a 3D view, you can see that it's a bit tricky, and we could click on this, we could right click and hide in view a few items, but an easier way that's new to 2016 is just to select the item that you want to have a look at. And can you see this is our contextual tab? Up here in the contextual tab under view, if I click on this, it's going to automatically create a little section box for us, so we can get a really great idea of what we just created and be able to work within that. So in my projects I would traditionally have quite a lot of these. I'm going to type in SD for shaded view, or I can come down here and go to shaded. And if I click on, this is the section box, this rectangular prism that you see, and all of these are little controls. If I hover over one of the controls and wait for the word control to appear, you can see that I can pull that up and down. Now this is down here in our 3D views. It is our 3D standard view that gets selected when we click on this little dog box. If I rename this to kitchen, the second that I click on this one up here, just notice what's going to happen down here. So if I click on this, it generates a new one down here for me, resets all of our viewing parameters. So now if I pop back to kitchen, I can have a number of these items all set up in my project, allowing me to work on my in-place families. So just to recap, this is an in-place family. It's 3D geometry that we've created ourselves, and the times that we use in-place families is when we need to use it to use the geometry of the project. So in this situation, I actually wanted to draw in relationship to the walls. And in addition to that, it's also when we only need to create it once. So anytime we need to create a family item that we need to use more than once, like a chair or a desk, we would actually go out and create a new family and then load that back in, because then I'll be able to use that in other projects.